This message comes from Schwab. Everyone has moments when they could have done better. Same goes for where you invest. Level up and invest smarter with Schwab. Get market insights, education, and human help when you need it.
Adam, many of us across the country are seeing what's happening in Minneapolis through cell phone footage and clips filmed by, everyday Americans walking around the street. But you have been on the ground there. Do the videos the rest of us are seeing capture what's going on, or are we missing something beyond the frame?
The videos do capture a part of what's going on, and I think the existence of the videos in and of itself tells you something. And the only measure of accountability that the people of Minnesota have is by recording these things when they happen and showing the world what's happening here. I mean, one of the most important things that people are doing here is observing, right? They follow ICE around, they alert people when ICE is in the neighborhood, but that's not the only thing people are doing. There are massive operations that are sort of locally organized around schools and churches where they're feeding people who are in hiding. And I went on some of these food runs. I saw these people. They are at home. Their cars are covered with snow because they haven't taken them out, because they're just sitting at home waiting for the invasion to be over.
As you likely have heard by now, last Saturday, Alex Pretti, a 37-year-old ICU nurse, was shot and killed by Border Patrol agents in Minneapolis. Citizen cell phone videos from multiple angles show Pretti with a phone in his hand before at least 6 officers tackle him, pinning him face down on the ground and shooting him in the back. Department of Homeland Security and the wider Trump administration have given various interpretations over what the nation saw happen in this footage and in the footage of other clashes between ICE and the people of Minneapolis, which is what I want to get into today. Where are these videos coming from, and what it means that the government and the public are widely divided in what they are seeing in them. To get into this, I'm joined by Adam Serwer, staff writer at The Atlantic, who has been on the ground in Minneapolis.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. I want to talk a little bit about some of the tactics that not just you've seen, but also we've seen more broadly, those of us who are outside of Minneapolis and watching from our computers or phones or TVs at home. One thing that's really struck me about this moment is the use of cell phone footage. These community members and neighbors have been out there documenting ICE's actions. Alex Pretti himself appears to have been filming ICE moments before he was shot. What do you make of this form of observation as a method of protest?
I think it's the only option that they have, because the federal government has sidelined or erased the internal office at DHS that used to be responsible for civil liberties and making sure that people didn't cross the line. And the only thing that people can do is record them being off the leash and then let the rest of the world know what's happening so that they can respond politically. What's extraordinary about this whole operation in Minnesota is that it's broad, it's localized, it's organized, it's effective. There's been some literature about this, and one of the things that makes nonviolence so effective is that more people can participate. If you are engaged in a kind of like violent campaign, that limits the amount of people who can participate. But when you look at the people who are on the ground in Minneapolis who are, bringing food or patrolling or observing or going to protests, it's people from all walks of life. It's moms, it's dads, it's all kinds of people. They're just normal, regular people who don't like the federal government coming in and trying to kidnap their neighbors. I think what's so impressive about this is that it's a kind of civic resistance that is designed to deal with the specific conditions that are being imposed on them by the federal government.
And what are some of the tactics they're using in response to ICE in their communities?
What you have in Minneapolis is a lot of people have been, going to legal trainings where they explain, where the lines are, that recording law enforcement is a First Amendment right. They're allowed to do it, and how to do it safely. Unfortunately, there's no way to be 100% safe, especially when you have masked, armed men who have been told by the government that they have immunity.
Right. And just to be more specific, it was Vice President J.D. Vance who said that the officer who shot Renee Macklin Good had, quote, absolute immunity, which some legal experts strongly disagree with.
These people, they are who are following ICE around. Like, typically what will happen is you will have two people in a car, one who is listening to a dispatcher, who is telling people where, ICE might be located. And sometimes a van or a sport utility vehicle with out-of-state plates will drive by, and they maintain a database of ICE verified license plates, and they'll run the plate. The co-pilot will run the plate, and then the driver will follow the van if it's an ICE van. And they'll start honking or blowing their whistles to make sure that everybody knows that ICE is nearby. And generally what happens is that ICE will eventually give up and go back to Whipple, which is their staging area in the Twin Cities. But sometimes these encounters escalate into confrontations, as we saw with Good and with Pretti.
The government, the media, and the public are, I guess we could describe it as, they're divided on what we're seeing in these videos. For one, Pretti's death immediately became a debate over how the Trump administration is describing it, and how journalists, multiple news outlets, and much of the public saw it. And the government was incredibly quick at drawing conclusions that many felt was not supported by what they saw in these videos. How do we reckon with this huge divide, right, between what the government is saying happened and what the public can see and what journalists have confirmed? And then you add to it this whole sort of like AI element where I think a lot of us feel sometimes quite vulnerable in terms of like wondering if we can believe what we're actually seeing. How do you think that kind of affects this whole situation?
Well, it's difficult because, I'm an opinion journalist, so I'm allowed to say, what I think. Mm-hmm. But most media outlets and the sort of post-World War II objectivity that is the culture at most mainstream media outlets, it's not really suited to a federal government that blatantly lies about verifiable facts. Every government spins, every government lies. That in itself is not unusual. Governments from both parties do that. What's unusual here is lying about easily verifiable things in a way that you can see that it's not true. And I think, to some extent, it's very difficult within that culture to say the government is lying. But you do have outlets like the New York Times doing sort of shot-by-shot analysis, proving that the various claims made by the federal government are false. I think it's just a very, very difficult information environment, very toxic information environment. I just think there's no easy answers other than verification. But most people are not journalists. They're not going to verify. And sometimes we don't even verify. Sometimes we see something and we assume it's real and we don't check because we're people and we're just scrolling our phones like everybody else.
It seems like the existence of AI is kind of advantageous because it just keeps people possibly in a state of distrust of themselves.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Distrust of yourself, distrust of what you're seeing. It creates an atmosphere of unreality in which you are not sure what's happening. And I think it makes it easier for people to deal with cognitive dissonance in the sense of when someone that they like does something bad, they can dismiss it as somehow fake. And that, obviously that cognitive tendency already existed as a natural part of human nature, but it's a little different when the ability to just make your own reality is so widely available.
Coming up,
the thing that has been most effective in standing up to Trump is ordinary people joining with other ordinary people to oppose what they're doing.
Stay with us.
This message comes from Whole Foods Market. From big game bites to sideline sips, get everything you need for a watch party victory at Whole Foods Market. Find yellow sale signs all over the store, from the chip aisle with salty snacks from Kettle and Late July, down to the meat department where there are no antibiotics ever fresh sausages are made in-house. And gear up with effortless, ready-to-heat wings and fresh guacamole from the prepared foods department. Instant touchdown. Fuel your game day with big flavors from Whole Foods Market.
This message comes from LinkedIn, who knows how even one hiring nightmare can ruin your small business dreams. That's why LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant uses insights from over 1 billion professionals to create a personalized shortlist of the best applicants, and even finds candidates you would have otherwise missed, so you can hire right the first time. Start hiring with LinkedIn and post your job for free today at linkedin.com/NPR. This message comes from NPR sponsor, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Finding the right leads can feel like an endless search for sellers. What if you could get to the right conversations faster? From finding new leads to strengthening existing relationships, LinkedIn Sales Navigator is your strategic AI-powered partner. It cuts through the noise with real-time data and insights, backed by LinkedIn's network of over 1 billion professionals. Try it free for 60 days at linkedin.com/benaminute. That's linkedin.com/benaminute. Terms and conditions apply.
This message comes from Instacart. Everyone's familiar with the unexpected hosting panic, like when the big game party finally makes it out of the group chat, but you volunteered to host, and suddenly you need snacks, drinks, dips, cups, and all the other game day essentials. With Instacart, you can get all those groceries delivered in as fast as 30 minutes. One quick order for everyone. That way, everything shows up right on time, making hosting easy and making it look like you had it planned all along. Download the Instacart app and get game day deals.
I want to talk a little bit more about the actual people that you have interacted with. I mean, you've been following people resisting ICE there in Minneapolis. Specifically, how would you describe this community of people?
Look, these people come from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different walks of life. But what they share is a commitment to protecting their neighbors. And their neighbors are their neighbors, no matter where they were born, whether they were born in Mogadishu or Minneapolis. These people are my neighbors and I'm going to protect them. And I found that, sort of profoundly moving because it's such a universalist sentiment. It really reminds me of sort of the best of American ideals.
It's worth noting here that the Twin Cities are very racially diverse with large Somali, Hmong, and Latin American populations. And there have been accusations that ICE has been racially profiling the people they are stopping on the streets, not only in Minneapolis, but other American cities as well.
A big chunk of the people in Minneapolis, St. Paul are in hiding, not necessarily because they're undocumented, but because they're afraid of being racially profiled by immigration agents who are not going to treat them with any kind of respect and could possibly, these encounters, people have gotten hurt or killed.
DHS has said accusations of racial profiling are, quote, disgusting, reckless, and categorically false. And for anyone who has been hurt, the administration says it is because they have been impeding immigration operations.
And they're doing it because they care deeply about the people around them.
The idea that the people around you are your neighbors, regardless of where they come from, regardless of what they look like. I think there are a lot of people that would describe that as, the best of what America can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Vice President J.D. Vance has described the protesters and people who are organized that you've just described as, quote unquote, engineered chaos. Do these words capture what you saw?
I mean, look, this is a organized, nonviolent opposition to a federal government that they feel is oppressing them or oppressing their neighbors. And so they are opposing it. It is a strategy of observation and to some extent interference in the sense that they are alerting people to ICE's presence so that ICE cannot operate secretly. This philosophy that they've adopted, that your neighbors are your neighbors no matter where they come from, is more or less the opposite of what people like Vance believe. They have continued to insist that there's something about, diversity that is destabilizing, that makes people not trust each other, that makes communities less cohesive. But in practice, we can see in Minneapolis that it certainly does not have to be true. Because these people, no matter who they pray to, no matter what languages they speak, no matter what their jobs are, these are people who are trying to protect each other. One thing I will say is that I talked to a young man at the protests in Minneapolis, and it was pretty extraordinary. Hundreds of businesses shut down last Friday, and thousands of people poured into the streets. And man, let me tell you, it was cold. It was between like -20 and -9.
Jeez.
The ink in my pen froze while I was out there trying to take notes. But I talked to a young man, and he was, his family was from Uganda, and his mom was like, "Hey, you need to know where my passport is in case I get picked up." And he said his parents told him, what's happening in Minneapolis right now is kind of the reason we left. We never thought it would happen here.
That's deep.
So, Stephen Miller says things like, migrants recreate the conditions of their broken homelands. Well, it seemed obvious to me that it wasn't, the immigrants recreating the quote unquote conditions of their broken homelands in the sense of, recreating the conditions of an authoritarian government. Miller's doing that. That's what he's doing. They just happen to recognize it.
Minneapolis is not the only community experiencing ICE in their neighborhoods. ICE is in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, in New York City. And I'm certain that there are many people listening across the country right now who also have ICE in their towns or not too far away. In light of both Pretti and Renee Macklin Good's deaths, what do you think other American cities are learning from this moment?
I think that the tactics that are being used in Minneapolis, in part come from previous protests of police killings like George Floyd and Philando Castile, but they also are tactics that were pioneered in other cities that Trump sent federal immigration agents to. The thing that has been most effective in standing up to Trump is ordinary people joining with other ordinary people to oppose what they're doing. Refusing civic nonviolent resistance has been the most effective opposition to the Trump administration. So I think, obviously, state legislators who are concerned about the safety and civil liberties of their residents will try to figure out a way to legislate. But ultimately, I think the most effective thing is ordinary people organizing in opposition to this stuff, building on the tactics that have been in use elsewhere.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciated hearing about your experiences in Minneapolis, and I'm really grateful that you came on the show to talk with me about them.
It was such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
That was Adam Serwer, staff writer at The Atlantic. You can read his article, Minnesota Proved MAGA Wrong, on their website. And to all of you listening, I want you to know that I see all these sweet messages you've been leaving me. I may be keeping my peace by turning off notifications on my phone, but I want you to know that my whole team and I read every message you leave in the comments and reviews. One of y'all said that you look forward to every episode and literally feel smarter each time you listen. Another said that this show has been a, quote, lighthouse in the storm. Another said that every morning you check to see if there is a new episode of this show. If you relate to any of this, please rate and review the show wherever you're listening. It helps grow our community and is one of the easiest ways for you and me to interact. Thank you for all the sweet notes, and I can't wait to hear from you soon. Love y'all. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Nina Patak.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. This holiday season, stop overpaying for wireless and switch to Mint. Shop 50% off unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/switch. Limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Above 35 gigabytes, network may slow when busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. This message comes from Mattress Firm. Tired of waking up sore? Mattress Firm sleep experts can match you with a Tempur-Pedic Adapt mattress built to relieve pressure. Shop the President's Day sale and save up to $500 on select Tempur-Pedic sets. Restrictions apply.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. Starting at $15 a month, make the switch at mintmobile.com/switch. $45 upfront payment for 3 months. 5 gigabyte plan equivalent to $15 a month. Taxes and fees extra. First 3 months only. See terms.